Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Double mute, bro. That's the only way to do it. Like, who's out there that doesn't have a double mute? Raise your hand. I'll make fun of you. You know what I'm saying? Need double mutes. If you don't got a double mute, put it in the comments. Let me know. I'll talk about you.
I don't think I have a double mute.
Yo, Jeremiah, listen. Some people aren't as cool as me and don't have a double mute. Yo, dude, what do you think of my hat? I just want to know.
That's pretty sick, dude. Like, you have some awesome hats. I don't know if I've ever seen you wear a white one, though.
I don't think I've ever worn one, to be honest with you.
I've never seen you wear a white hat. It's like always a black hat with like some sick lettering on there.
Right? Like, shout out to Jeff for creating a merchandise store with white hats on purpose so that I would have to wear a white hat because he knows what's going to make me like look good. You know, if I don't have people that do that for me, I don't look good at all. Like, I'm a very ugly old man at this point in my life. So, yo, what's up, Rebels? Thanks for joining us today for another weekly Rebel Rally Live. You got your boy Dale Dupree. You got your homeboy over here, Jeremiah Griffin.
Happy Friday, Rebels.
You know, what's going on, Jeremiah? How's your week? What'd you do this week? Anything
Dude,
cool?
I'm like so pumped this morning. I mean, you know why? Like, the biggest reason is the personal reason. My 5th grade daughter won the school spelling bee. So she worked really hard. Like, that's always the lesson that we want to teach our kids, right? Like, it doesn't always turn out the way you want, but like, you can put yourself in a good position by working hard and doing the right things. And she did that. I'm pretty sure she knew every single 450 words that were in that packet. So she goes on to county, and we'll see from there. But we're starting a new squadron this next Tuesday. So just talked to an awesome rebel who jumped in there. So it's like super cool dude. So yeah, just like pumped. We've got 2 spots left, I think. 2 spots left. Have a couple conversations this afternoon. So after this afternoon, we might have 0, but maybe Dale could be convinced.
You never know.
Another one. This is supposed to be the last one of 2022, but you never know.
You never know. You never know. But also, like, who cares? Anybody out there care? That's what I'm curious about. Let's see some comments. Who's out there right now? Look at this. Look, we got Luke. Dude, what's up, Luke Frazier? How's it hanging, man? You know, Luke actually, I don't know how we got on the topic of donuts, but at some point we got on the topic of donuts, and Luke sent me like a website or a recipe site or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it basically goes, hey, this is what we're going to do. Instead of going to get donuts, we're going to make our own. And he like very thoughtfully sent me, what a rebel, dude. You know, I should probably go back to that text and do whatever it was that he sent me because it looked delicious when I went there. I was like, oh, these are like homemade. It's like a recipe. This is dope. What's up? We got Neil Slocum in here. What's up, Neil? Seen you in a hot minute.
He's just here for the merch.
He's here for the merch. Neil, there's a for everybody out there watching right now, there's a post in my feed. It's only a few days old. It needs 1,000 likes in order for us to convince Jeff, our CEO, to release the store. And then you can buy Rebel swag all day long, and it's a whole lifestyle brand. So it should be a lot of fun for all the Rebels out there. You know, students still get the old school merch, right, when they come through, but we've got a whole new front-facing consumer product for people to start wearing their Rebellion out loud. Pretty excited about it. So, Neil, get in there and like the post, dude. We don't get 1,000 likes. It's just not opening. It's kind of the bottom line. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. Hey, and then Timothy's here. Timothy Hyde. I think his name is actually Skeletor, right, Jeremiah? And then also, he gave us a great comment in here. He put Bob Newhart in the comments in here, which is an inside joke, but I just wanted to point it out real quick for Jeremiah's sake.
Yeah, I appreciate
because he loves the nickname Bob Newhart.
I appreciate that, Tim, but now you're dead to me. So
it's good times. Jeremiah, what's on your mind this week? Like, what's one of the big things that some of the rebels you've talked to are dealing with, or maybe some of the hot topics that are out there in general, or you know, that doesn't have anything to do with getting to President's Club? Like, what's out there, bro? What are we chatting about today?
Oh man, it's always worrisome when you ask me this because I'm like, oh, there's nothing in my mind.
Yeah, but there's plenty in your heart.
Yeah,
right, Rebel.
I like that.
What's in your heart, Rebel?
Yeah, typical dude where I'm like, I got nothing on my mind. Well, I mean, like, I think the thing that's been on my mind for the last week and a half is like the mass layoffs. And you had a really good post about it. I've seen some other really good posts about mass layoffs and stuff. And another thing, like, man, we got a lot of LinkedIn bashing, and I understand some of it, but shoot, man, like sometimes a lot of people just like jump straight to the hate. Like there's no seeking to understand. It's like a guy puts a post, about like, hey, I have an ad out for SDRs, and like and it's a little bit of a rant, right? But he's talking about how like not everybody followed the instructions, and he's venting frustration for sure. But then in comments, like people are just like, you suck. And this is why you suck, and like your company sucks, and like you only have 22 employees, something like that. Was like, dang, man, like seek to understand. And so, man, we assume so much. We just jump to these things that we have in our own head that are based on our own biases and all this stuff that we come from, instead of like really trying to figure out like what is the other person actually saying, or like why are they frustrated. Like why are they frustrated, and like how could I help, rather than just jumping on and being like, you know what, I don't like what you said, so now I hate you. Or at least I sound like I do, right? So
sucks. I think it's kind of like human nature, but I think this is a really good topic, right? Because we tell rebels all the time that to meet people where they are, right? And to seek to understand, it's part of our principles, right? Like in your sales walk, just as much as when you're on LinkedIn and you see something you don't like. I think the thing that people could hear from us right now around this subject about being rebellious in these moments is that, like, listen, like being mean and hating on stuff doesn't convince anybody of anything. You might get a whole bunch of like, of the people that are mostly just passerbys, or the folks that are kind of like the viewers of LinkedIn that don't usually participate in things. You might get them hitting like a whole bunch on your comment. Right. But what good is that doing? And ultimately, like, what kind of reputation is that building? And really, it's just speaking to a negative part of our lives, of a consistent part of our lives, right? Like you're driving in the car, someone cuts you off, you pulled up to a stop sign, 4 seconds before somebody else at a 4-way stop, and they pull out in front of you before, like all the small things in life, right? All of them. You're waiting in line for coffee, and the person in front of you is digging through their wallet to find exact change because somehow they don't have a credit card, and you want to be negative in those moments. You want to be negative instead of just trying to understand, ultimately trying to meet people where they are, trying to be helpful, trying to be supportive, right? And that doesn't mean that you got to be positive all the time, people. We're not saying that, right? Ultimately, what we're saying is that a level of awareness is what creates massive success in your life beyond business, right? Into your personal walk as well, too. Just assuming things or having expectations or being assumptive as an individual leads down a bad path. So, for example, somebody's not writing you back, right? You've got a proposal out to them. You've spent the last 6 months doing discoveries on discoveries on discoveries, and revising things. And finally, it's like, I think we're going to move forward. Let's move forward, right? You're at that place in the sales cycle, and you got a person that's just ghosting you. Jeremiah hates this, by the way.
Nobody listening has ever dealt with that, I don't think.
Well, what happens? Like, usually we assume in those moments, or we get flustered and we head to the negative. Like, why aren't they writing us back? What's going on? Why am I not the most important thing in their life right now? Instead of just understanding, seeking to understand, but ultimately like having that level of awareness that like you're not the most important thing. Right. And thinking about our own lives in those moments as well, too, and thinking like, what is important to me in this situation? Well, is the person viewing you as agendistic, as like, yeah, they're just trying to hit their quota this quarter. And sure, we need their product, but like we could go another month without it. We could go another year without it. We've been doing it for 25 without them, period. Right. What, ultimately, what is actually happening in those moments? And are you really, truly trying to ultimately understand what's going on? I think really it's just like an attitude discussion. It's pretty sad that for the most part, people that, walk around you in a coffee shop, or you pass by on the street, or driving, or your neighbors living next to you, that for the most part, everybody's just kind of like in it for themselves and like watching their back, right? Because at some point somebody did what Jeremiah was just talking about to them, right? Blew them up on LinkedIn and called them a dummy dumb and told them that their business sucked, right? And so we're trying to guard ourselves from that pain or that hurt that people put out. But there's plenty of us I know there's some rebels watching right now that feel the same way, that ultimately want to see others succeed, want to see things get better around them, from sales to the personal side of life, the whole 9 yards, right? I think it's a mindset shift, though, for people that normally when something happens, or you're hungry and you need to eat right now, or, just like these individual moments in our life that cause us to like shift away from who we naturally and truly and authentically actually are. But instead we become like this version of ourselves, or this, sometimes I get a little angry, right? Was that who you are, right? Are you? And it's okay if, by the way, like, it's okay if you get a little angry sometimes, but are you the person that gets angry and expresses it through things like violence or verbally, and abusively toward people? Like, why? That's not who you actually are. You were not made to be that in the first place. No one is. I think realistically, a rebellious way to look at, the crying CEO or the dude trying to hire SDRs is to just meet people empathetically where they are and say, like, hey, even if this is wrong, like, the only way that person humbles themselves or learns and becomes better is through your influence. And if your influence isn't showing up, right, if your influence isn't there for them to latch onto, and all it is negativity and hate and bashing, and I mean, what do you think is going to happen to that person ultimately? They're just going to sift deeper into the abyss, or they're going to like disconnect from people altogether at some point, which isn't fair, because life should be lived with each other, right? I'm going through some shit this week, and yeah, I just said shit on live LinkedIn and wherever else we are, because sorry, mom, I know you're watching, because I can, and because that's the expressive emotion that I'm sitting in right now. But I'm not going around taking it out on other people. I'm not going around and ultimately like projecting that into other people's lives. Now, being vulnerable in those moments and like letting people know that you're not okay is fine, right? But I'm not going to allow the anger I feel toward the situation to even come out and affect other people around me, right? But I'm okay with not being okay at the end of the day, and I think that that's what people need to understand. And a lot of times, even the original post, like you were talking about, it comes from that place of not being okay, and not necessarily knowing how to use that reflexive awareness, or do it appropriately, I should say, in a way that people could read it and not jump to conclusions of that you suck. Right? So ultimately it's all about self-awareness at the end of the day, but another ingredient to that is awareness of others, and another ingredient of that is awareness of situations. Right. And those three things combined create better people. And whether you're looking at a sales situation, or you're looking at, a hard conversation that you got to have with a family member or a good friend or somebody you work with, right? Like life, having that ingredient of awareness, those three ingredients of awareness live and active within you is huge, right? It's just like in a process, right? You got a sales playbook, right? Got some kind of process your boss makes you go through, right? The authentic way to run that process is to understand that when you come to those bullet points or those parts inside of the sales cycle, as an example, is to stop yourself and to ask, right? Like, am I being aware of the other person? Am I ultimately being aware of myself? Am I ultimately being aware of the situation? And rebels do things like that, and because of it, rebels have more success. Ultimately, it's a silent majority at the end of the day. There's a lot of people out there nodding their head and going like, yeah, I learned this a long time ago and I had to learn it the hard way. Right? But once you get to that level of awareness, I think it can elevate your existence entirely. All the things that are going on within it. That's just my 2 cents on the situation.
That was a great 2 cents.
Was it worth 10, or should I stick with 2?
Yeah, it was definitely worth more than 2. Took more than 2. But
definitely, it was like at least 11 minutes.
It was good. Sure. I like to hear you monologue about stuff sometimes. For those that don't know, that I used to be a student, like before I came on board here, sometimes I would ask Dale questions and he would go into like kind of a monologue, right? There's a teaching monologue for sure. But yeah, it was super impactful for me. It was like, I always tell people that like my coaching experience was definitely part therapy. And a lot of sales coaching, of course, but part therapy as well. So that's what a lot of coaching, at least in our realm, coaching is. So that was good.
I mean, it's surrounding yourself with good people ultimately too. Like regardless of our business and what we do for a living, ultimately, like we created this because a lot of people don't have this. They don't have the opportunity to be able to hear someone else's perspective or to be able to speak their mind in moments that they need it. I think I talk a lot, but ultimately I also say to myself, it's therapeutic for me to talk and like to speak things out into the open and to make sure that they're known. Right. And sure, like there's a lot of ways that you could dissect that and assess it at the end of the day, but it's what makes me uniquely Dale. And that's what we want to encourage people to do, right, dude? Like even with everything going on in your life this week, here Friday morning, right? You get to like celebrate something awesome inside of all the other crap that you personally been having to deal with yourself, right? And I think that that's what it's all about. Like it's ultimately having people around us that continue to not project positivity, right? But ultimately to meet us where we are, to walk with us through those paths, and to be that influence that like when we get back to the good, that they're still here. They didn't check out and come back just for the good, right? But they experienced it all the way through. I think what's happened in your life this week is awesome. Ultimately, just from the perspective of like being a proud dad and, having to come to some of those real world moments for yourself. Like a lot of people don't think about what a doctor or an orthodontist bill would cost having 4 kids, or a dentist bill, right? But you've experienced that this week, and that's what makes you human, and what makes you attracted to others as well too, from the perspective of like, this guy gets it, and he's a normal dude, and I think that's why people buy from you, Jeremiah, at the end of the day. And that's why you were so successful at your last 2 orgs, let alone at the Sales Rebellion, because you have something about yourself that humanizes the experience for people. The experiences that you give to others is on that level that ultimately allows somebody to kind of like check out of the grind, or not have to think too much about what's going on in their life in the first place, and to say, man, this dude identifies with like my problems and stuff that I've been wanting to vent about on the Rebel Rally Live, like Dale does for 18 solid minutes, and that you're an enabler of those moments for people. You mentioned also like mass layoffs going on.
Yeah,
talk to me a little bit more about just like that subject, or like what is this? Are you calling somebody out here?
No, not necessarily. I mean, and really to go back real quick too, I think the permission to do all those things and just like be open and be vulnerable, to be happy when you're happy, to be sad when you're sad, and be honest with people, tempered by emotional intelligence. It's one of the biggest things that I learned, as we went through coaching. And I see a lot of students, learn that sort of thing and feel a weight lifted from themselves, that they now like, man, I can do these things. I can be myself. I can be a person inside of my sales walk. I don't have to be, some robot drone, clone of whoever else, I can be myself. So moving on, mass layoffs. No, I didn't have anybody in particular. I've seen some really good posts. Basically, like I said, you had a good one talking about how, hey, it comes down a lot of times to, bad leadership, or bad planning, and things like that. And just some other really good posts. I can't think of any in particular as well. Just saying like, why do we feel like this is normal? And why does everybody feel like they need to come on and say like, oh, it was so great. They promised me that I'd be here forever. And 3 weeks later, I'm gone, but I really enjoyed my, time there. Like, you don't have to do that. Like, just because this company, like they didn't do you any favors, right? Like some of them were just like total turds, right? Like they even knew that they were struggling, and they just like kept going on like everything was fine, and then did what they did, and then they leave a lot of people out in a lurch. And I can't speak to those people's like personal, feelings of how they felt when they, laid people off, but we know for a fact that many of them don't, they don't care. At the end of the day, it's about them and theirs, rather than really like looking out for other people. And I know things are unavoidable. Like I get that sort of thing, and you make mistakes, and it, has bad consequences. But many times I think it's true. Like, most people just don't really think about it. They just plow ahead. They don't think about the people as the main thing, right? Like, why don't we think of our people as the main thing and run our business based on like, hey, we're responsible for all these people. These people are trusting us. They're giving us their time. They're not everybody's great. Not everybody is perfect. You're going to go through some bad ones yourself, but like, why isn't that, our bigger focus? And it's a generalization. There's a lot of great companies out there and stuff too, but that was that was kind of my thoughts as to what I was looking at these posts and things like that. So.
And I think ultimately, kind of to add on to that is that when the layoffs start, it's not always just the sales people, right? We talk about that a lot in our content and what we do because of the rebellion and where we lean in sales, but it's not always the salespeople, right? And by the way, Jeremiah mentioned that there was a lot of good posts out there. Shout out to Timothy Hyde, who just dropped this gentleman, James Perry, says he's got a beautiful post about recent layoffs. Anybody that's watching right now, go check out James Perry. Go check out this post he's talking about. Appreciate that, Timothy. And but ultimately, there's layoffs affect everybody, and the salespeople. The salespeople at the end of the day are the people that are driving revenue. They're people that are like keeping the company alive. So like when salespeople get laid off, it can be scary for everybody else inside of the organization to an extent. Like regardless of a restructure or whatever somebody's calling it. Right, it can be very frightening for people in general, and so this affects more than just you in sales or you in marketing from the perspective of like, oh, our revenue's down, we're probably getting fired. Like, so are other people in that process. I think Stripe just laid off 1,100 people. I'm sure that's not just salespeople. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I only saw that it was 1,100, but ultimately, it is. It's a travesty. But like, here's the problem: is that we all become very loud for a couple days, right? We throw it in comments and we tell people this isn't right. What are we doing about it? Who are we influencing? Where are we putting ourselves in communities? And are we telling ourselves at the end of the day, there's nothing I can do about it? Because that's a lie. And you shouldn't be telling yourself that. We can influence the next generation. We can be a part of that ultimate change. I don't really care about your argument in regards to like, be realistic, Dale. I'll be realistic when I'm dead. But ultimately, I've seen how to be involved, effectively by being in corporate America and working, for somebody else. I've seen how we can be more effective in our jobs and as leaders or in our roles in general as people at an organization to help to maintain healthy structure around culture and to help people to understand that business can be more than just profit, all right, that it can ultimately be about culture. And that it can be about building something fantastic. There's also this argument a lot of people like to make about your business is not your family, and like just get out of here right now if you feel that way, right? Because ultimately, like we don't, and it's not that suddenly that it's not that we look at things like Skittles and rainbows. I mean, at the same time too, like we've had to do really hard stuff. Here's some massive transparency. We at a certain point in the build of this company, in the very beginning stage, we're only 3.5 years in right at this point, but in that 1.5 year mark, I had to call my sister and tell her, hey, I got to cut your hours. We can't afford you. And also, I'm not taking in a paycheck, but this is what we're going to do. But like, that's a hard conversation to have with your literal family that works in your organization. But at the end of the day, she knows, and I know I can say this confidently, that there's no way I'm not going to do everything in my power to continue to build and create the vision that I had. And here we are today, a couple of years later. And, not to say that we're not still a startup and that there's not suddenly no struggles ever whatsoever, but it is like we have created a company that focuses, like you said, around the people and their processes internally inside of our organization in order to serve others, not to sell a product, right? We fix problems and we invite people to be a part of that process. We invite them to fix their own problems through us or with us, beside us, right? Never behind us or in front of us, though. Or we like to walk directly alongside people during these types of moments. And ultimately, like, listen, if you're watching this right now and you've been laid off and you're in a sales or marketing position, holler. Give us a holler, because we have resources. We can hook you up with people. We can put you in the Rebel Slack. We can network you out to people that are hiring right now, that are being very frugal at their businesses. They're not buying $1 million mansions just because they can, or driving Lamborghinis because they've reached that status level, but instead are recognizing realistically what's happening around them and hunkering down in a sense in order to continue to build effectively and not have to go to people and say, sorry, here's your pink slip. Maybe we'll call you again one day. Right. And there's a sick cycle to that too. At the end of the day, right? You can go get a job right now at a sales org and probably negotiate a salary of $100,000 a year where you shouldn't be making that. Where like 6 years earlier, it was like 18,000 plus commission. You know,
I remember those.
Yeah, I do remember those days. I'm sure you do too, right? But ultimately, we got to think about if we want to be realistic, we got to think about those types of issues. That, you know, ultimately these companies are investing so much more money into people, and they're not, and really what they're thinking about at the end of the day is, well, if we have 200 salespeople, we'll have this much profit. Well, that's not the case, right? Because salespeople have to be motivated. They have to understand and in a healthy manner that they got to go out and sell. And that's a hard thing when there's no development, no training, no coaching, no X, no Y, no Z inside of the organization. It's just like, go do your thing. You're a salesperson, aren't you? Get out there and sell.
You've done it.
Here's a brand new market that we've never sold anything into. Enjoy, right?
Like, do it again.
These are the things I'm talking about that we can be proactive about. You know, not just as individuals, but as people that can become leaders inside of these organizations as well too. And you know, just in general, the things that we can influence. You can all influence, whether you believe that about yourself or not. If there's something in you saying, no, I can't influence, that's a lie. There's a liar in you telling you those things, right? You absolutely have the power to influence. You might not be able to sit on a live and talk like a crazy person like Dale, right? But I promise you that you have that influence in your circles with the people that you can impact and that you do come into contact with. The rebellious outlook to this whole concept of layoffs and what's happening is that first off, stop being the bandwagon comment of this sucks or these guys should have something done to them. Like, instead start saying, we're going to change this, right? Start being part of fixing the problem. You know, for guys like myself or people inside of the rebellion in general, it's being a resource instead of you know, going out there and firing up a torch and grabbing a pitchfork. It's just being a resource. Hey, let us help. Let us do whatever we possibly can to help you in this moment. And something as simple as that sometimes reinstates belief in those people that they are worthy and that there are good individuals out there that will help them. And then at the end of the day, mean it and do it, right? Even if it doesn't make you any money, that's not what life is. Life is servant leadership in action. That is exactly what it is that we have to be doing on a daily freaking basis. And we preach it all the time here at the Rebellion, but every single individual in here. Another way to rebelliously look at these concepts, though, too, is to say, I will make change in my own way. I will make change. I will lead that charge. I will do things in my sales career that enable other individuals, that enable my buyers, that don't just like save them money, but ultimately that create healthy ecosystems at these companies that I'm selling my product into, as an example. And look, you can't control what those people do with all that savings or all those efficiencies or all those problems you fix, right? But at the end of the day, if you're the person out there taking action, believing that this is something that will help people, you'll change the game. Bottom line. And that's just my 2 cents on that too, Jeremiah. So I got 4 cents in now at this point. I just want to like rack my tally real quick.
Well said. Well said. I don't really have anything to add to that. Anything I add would probably suck anyway.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all. Let's give some shout outs. Looks our girl Joanne is in here. What's up? Enrique, Timothy. We already had Timothy is very active in here. Right. And here we go right here.
Haley said she just got a job offer after she was laid off a couple weeks ago. So
awesome. Man, that's fantastic. Way to go, Haley. I like what Amanda says here. Salespeople have to believe wholeheartedly in the company they back. Right. And that's another piece of the puzzle. Y'all stop working for companies just because they'll pay you more money. Right? Go work for companies you can believe in and that will like take a stand for you and that ultimately that have good culture and that will give you an experience as an individual employee and not just like put you in the corral and coal you all the way to the end, right? And by the way, you don't want to be cold.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day, right? And I put a post that like, I don't know, probably some people made fun of it, but they didn't show up in the comments. But you know, I said like I don't work for money. You know, after we were kind of joking, I don't work for money anymore. And Of course we work for money, right? There's a certain amount of money, and you want me to make a lot of money, and I definitely would not mind making a lot of money. But that's not the number one thing. Like, that's not what I work for anymore. It's just gonna be a byproduct. I don't want that to be my focus anymore, because the times when it was, I just ended up like hating where I was. I had like jerks for leaders, and it was just all completely metric driven. They didn't care too much about the people or anything. And so every time I've gone somewhere where it was just about the money, that's exactly what happened. Not to say that that's necessarily going to be the case, that the company that pulls you away with $20,000 more salary, that's definitely going to happen. But we know that oftentimes it does, because companies will win people with money because their culture sucks, and they have to pay more because they keep losing people because their culture sucks. They run them off. They've got bad leaders. They just and that's how it happens. So I ain't gonna do that anymore.
Feel that, bro. I think ultimately, like, what people need to understand is that we perpetuate the definition of insanity and live it in our daily lives all the time. We watch other people do these things, create these crappy outcomes. We even have this conversation about it, and then we don't act on it, right? Or we get to 20 years down the road, and we're like, oops, I forgot. I guess this whole time I've just been going in a circle. I think realistically and ultimately it's about choice, and it's about setting the example, and it's about not saying, well, let me just get mine until I'm 55, 65 years old and retire and get some Social Security, and hopefully I can like sell a house or two in the process and end up in a better place, right? I do not believe in luck or happenstance, or like not having some kind of intentional direction or action inside of your life in the first place, right? Yeah, like getting into sales was the best thing that ever happened to me, but it wasn't always good. Right. But at the same time, when I got into it, I never said I'm going to do the same thing I did last year. Never once. Right. Even when I had the greatest years, I said, cool, how does it get better? Right. And I believed ultimately that I could find that for myself. And ultimately, it's not like it's not just a belief. Right. It's reality. But you have to start with belief. Belief is what really ultimately designs and defines what it is that we're building into at the end of the day. Without that belief, like, nobody cares as much as you. So without that belief, like, where are you going in the first place, right? And at the same time, too, with that said, I think it's ultimately about this concept of awareness, back to awareness in all of this. Because if I can sit back and say, oh, wait a second, I'm at a place in my life and at a juncture, right, where I see that I'm consistently doing things that are creating problems. And that I have bowed down to the status quo, that I have taken a seat beside mediocrity, right? That I've decided to rest instead of continuing to build my legacy and continuing to persevere toward what it is that ultimately I'm trying to create. That turns into 30 years later, you're 50 plus years old going, what the heck happened? I don't want to be that, right?
Yeah, since that's like 10 years more for me.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Jeremiah's old, guys. Like, what's your birthday, by the way? It's just so everybody on here. There's a lot of people on here right now. So shout out to Jeremiah. He's got a birthday coming up. What's the date? You need to get like peppered with things.
December 16th. LinkedIn will remind everybody.
Yeah, but y'all just put that date down now and like show the boy some love before he gets there, or like on the day. Make him feel it. Yeah.
My man Luke had a good question. So other than company impact or purpose or salary, what would a company need to offer to capture Rebel salespeople?
What do you think, bro? What's your answer to that?
My answer to that, well, I mean, like, it's kind of, I guess it's a little bit, since I work for the Rebellion, and not everybody has a Dale Dupree, because like, y'all don't, let me just say, and I'm going to flatter you, right? But people ask me a lot, like, what is Dale like? And I'm like, he's like what you see in the podcast. Like, he's literally like what you see there. And so it's refreshing to know when you meet him in person that he's not a different person there than he is in real life, which is really cool. And all the things you talk about are all of the things that you do, not perfectly all the time, but like, that's how you live your life. That's how you run the company. Or, well, Jeff runs the company, and Jeff's the same way, right? but that's how you that's how you run your part and encourage everybody. And it's completely you. Like that's what you've set aside. That's what the Rebellion is all about, and that what you and Jeff and the rest of us now are building. So it's a little bit, I guess, easier for me. But when, to me, it really, like, it always comes down to the people. It's the leadership. And so what did he say? Besides purpose, company impact, or salary, what would a company need? What else would a company need? Man, what else would you need?
I think ultimately, like, you need to offer a future story to the person coming in. Like, what vision does the person coming into your organization have for themselves and the future story they want to tell? You're not always going to be a destination in your organization, right? As a clear point. And I've said this hundreds of thousands of times in the last, like, 15 years of my journey in the business world, right? Is that sometimes you're just a stop along the way. You're a season in somebody's life. It like impact, purpose, right? A good salary, right? Like, those things are nice. Ultimately, it's a bunch of talk, right? But if I can follow somebody, like if they can come in and I can follow their journey by enabling them through my organization to do things that they love to do and that they're really good at, that they're excited about, right? And really, and like what I mean by that too is like, here we have my homie Art Post. Shout out to Art Post, OG of the copier world. What a great comment. I'm 65 and I still love what I do. Right. And ultimately, like, that comes back to that whole, like, nobody cares as much as you. Right. So, and Art is one of those guys that he has always been an example of somebody that perseveres, that moves the needle forward, that does things that make him happy at the end of the day. But listen, you can be this for somebody. You can help them with this. Right. I'm sure Art has some good stories about some bosses. I'm sure he's got to have a couple good bosses in his life at some point. Right. We all do. Right. But at the same time, it is about this concept, Luke, of putting your money where your mouth is and practicing what you preach. A great example is the Patagonia CEO. Everybody says, like, it comes down to money. Everybody's greedy. Nobody's ever going to change. That's just not true. And we just watched it. We watched a guy give a valuated company, $3 billion company, right? I think it's somewhere in that range. He gave it away to a nonprofit. And sure, like, we'll probably read some articles down the road that's like, he committed tax fraud, or, like, listen, there's always something at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we can't put our faith in people as much as we put it in God, from my perspective, right? And then ultimately, when we find people that align with that side of it, like where they look at life through an eternal lens, an infinite game, and they don't just think of it as a bunch of money so that I can sail around the world at 55 years old and pretend like nothing else in the world matters, but instead having direct and immediate impact for yourself that correlates back to you just as much, right? Because listen, you don't give a company away that's $3 billion unless you really believe in what you're doing. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like, we can all say that we would do the same thing, but I asked myself almost immediately when I saw it, I was like, this is awesome. It's something that I've been waiting for, this example in my life at some point, right? And I feel like there have been some other ones that have surfaced recently, and I talk about them every once in a while, right? And I think we discuss them, but ultimately this one's a big one, right? That y'all look at this man, like, this man, he could have anything he wants, and he could have infinite amounts of money through an acquisition and just like playing the stock market, right, henceforward in his life, but instead he just walked away and said, no, this is a legacy. Oh, what are we doing to help people build their legacy? You don't have to be the CEO to build a legacy. You can be Robin. You can be Catwoman. You can be whoever you want to inside of the story that's being told. You can identify as that person. You can be the support. You can be the front lines. You can be in the back, in the shadows, and no one ever knows about you, and build effectively a legacy that impacts other people. And I think that ultimately that's what companies need to recognize and offer at the end of the day.
Yeah, excellently said. I was, thinking a little bit more about it as you were talking. To me, it really comes back to the dedication to, like, do what you say you're going to do and be who you say you're going to be. And that really kind of speaks to what I was talking about with you, because that's like the reason we hate politicians, right? Because, like, they say all these things about who they are or what they're going to do, and they never do it. So they piss us off, and that's why they have such a low approval rate. Surprise, surprise. So, but if you've got someone that says like, I'm gonna do this, even if you don't agree with it, you probably still at least respect it, maybe, to a certain degree. But that's why people come to you. People come to you because you stand for a certain something. You say you're going to do a certain something. You have this story that they can live inside. And then if it proves to not be true, and I know that sometimes that's unavoidable, right? Like people have their own perception of things and that's their truth. And it may not be true for most of the people inside your organization. And, that happens sometimes. But generally, if people are finding out that what you say is not what actually happens, what you're doing is not what they're experiencing, then they're not going to want to be there. And so that's really what it comes down to for me. So when I think about my experience, that's what it all comes back to, is like, I knew what I was going to get, and it hasn't changed, And so like, how nice would that be for everybody to be like, walk in and like, I expect this, not anything crazy, but like I was told this, and this is my end of the bargain. Like sales, we've got to sell. I can't just sit around on my duff and expect to keep my job and say, oh, you mistreated me. But, I expected this. I'm holding up my end of the bargain. They're holding up their end of the bargain too. And we're both, going over, above and beyond for each other. And it's, it's a very beautiful thing. But that's where your culture comes in and where it's strong. And but there's just too many companies that you think you're going to get one thing and you put in all this effort and then you get dumped or, whatever, mistreated. And so we know that happens all the time. So
let's give up rebellious like challenger action around this too, just like the other stuff that we talked about. Like let's just say this. Like I think you made a really good point inside of everything that you were talking about. Like how can people practice this? I think one of the first things that you can do is you can die to yourself, right? You can burn the ships and move forward. You can say that there are things in my life that need to be let go of because what's happening is they're controlling me and they're dictating the experience that other people have. And it's not truly the one I want to give in the first place. And then also another really cool thought around this would be like, who is someone in your life, like Jeremiah mentioned, that has their own truth that you might not necessarily agree with or align with? Be there for that person. I don't really give a crap if I meet somebody that believes in a religion that is like so far-fetched from me, right, and what I believe. I'm going to love that person exactly the same. I'm going to meet them where they are. I'm going to show up to like their ceremony of, like getting robed or whatever, like Scientologists do. I don't know, but I'm going to be there for that. Like, even if I don't believe in what's happening, because I want this person to know that I believe it deep in my soul, regardless of what I think of eternity and religion. I believe in you. I believe in what makes you happy, and I will be here for you to the bitter end, no matter how uncomfortable it makes me feel. And ultimately, that's what develops awareness in people. That's a rebellious thing that you can do. I like how my boy Joey Perez just said it. He said, "Go Rebels," and he flashed the hang sign. Let's go. He's like, he knows my Florida roots.
And I think the challenge too, we can kind of tie back to last week, is taking a risk. It doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm just going to go and risk my job and like tell everybody off. It doesn't have to be that kind of risk. But oftentimes we just sit right where we are. And like you said, you got the hang on comment along with everybody else. But like, what is the risk that you could take around this to impact some change? Like that, there's probably a lot of different things. It looks different for different people. But what does that look like? It doesn't have to be a risk that's going to cost you your job, but it's just something outside of your comfort zone that, could help, could make an impact. Really, the one, that you mentioned, call up someone that like you have different views for, and talk about, especially if you've had a recent argument, mend some relationships. That takes a risk, the neighbor that yelled at me the other day for playing soccer with my kids in the yard and said I was a bad dad because I was too loud. I went over there and was like, hey, I just wanted to try to understand what was going on. I don't know if something is happening in your life that is difficult. And I just, I wanted to apologize if like we were offensive, even though we were just playing soccer. And I really don't understand, but can we have a conversation about it? They didn't want to have a conversation about it. The husband apologized, But his wife, who was the one that yelled at us, didn't want to have a conversation, and that's okay. But I was over there. She knows that the willingness and the openness to a conversation is there for when she's ready, and so that's the important thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about that impact. It's all about being open. It's all about being the first person to act, and then humility. At the end
5 years ago, pre-rebellion, I would have never done that.
Yeah, right. Shout out to Luke with this comment. You know, we appreciate that, bro. And like, I feel like what we all should be thinking about in our daily lives is that like church doesn't have to happen just on a Sunday or a Saturday or a Wednesday or whenever you and your religion specifies. Church is all day. You can be growing personally. You can be making impact and differences every moment that you have the opportunity to do it. So welcome to church, guys. And we have a lot of fun on these lives. This one's gone way longer than the last couple of them. You know, Jeremiah and I really like at the end of the day, we just want to let rebels out there know that, you know, this is a space for you to come on Fridays to express yourself, to leave us some rebellious comments, to give us some great content, you know, to feed off of and to be able to talk about at further events. And ultimately, like, this is part of that process of growing our community and getting it even closer together. With that said, we got a free Rebel Slack community that anybody can get into. You can go to our website and access it through a couple different buttons on there, resources page for sure, but sometimes it doesn't work. So if you need a little bit of help, shout us out on LinkedIn, you know, put us in a piece of content, right, and tag us. Like, can't get into the Slack, send us a DM, right? Something to get our attention, and we're happy to make sure you get into our community that's in existence 24/7 outside of these Friday slots. And furthermore, if you need things like prayer or just brothers and sisters at your back, head to our website. You can find a prayer request down at the bottom. Tell us what's going on. You don't even got to give us your name, and we'll be thinking of you. We'll be motivated, you know, by what it is that's going on in your life, to be able to meet you every morning when we get together by ourselves in our own time, to be able to lift you up and ask for healing, ask for difference, ask for patience, ask for more sales, whatever it is you need. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rebellion is a movement just as much as it is an organization, right? And at the end of the day, we are here for people, and we want you to know that. And we hope that you continue to see us act on it. It's been 3.5 years trying our best, right? But hopefully 10 years from now, you know, it's somebody else sitting right here in these seats that we are talking like this, influencing a generation to think differently, to rebel against the status quo, the typical outcomes, the things that suck. And we all know it, but we're afraid to talk about it. Jeremiah and I are not scared. We'll take all the hate mail that you got. We'll take all the different opinions any day. We love being challenged. We love people where they are. We love difference. And we absolutely do. But we also believe that our message can resonate with a lot of people at the end of the day, because look, we're all sick of it. And when I say it, I mean the thing that's happened in our life that's just too consistent, that's negative, that sucks, that can change. Right. And so we're grateful to you for being here and spending time with us today, listening to me drop way too many 2 cents, 10-minute rants, and for listening to Jeremiah's opinions and also the topics that he brings to the table these weeks for us to discuss and go over. If you have things you want us to talk about sales related, or you want to know our favorite color, or, you know, which basketball team, Orlando Magic, the Phoenix Suns suck, you know, that we like, just ask us in the comments.
So wrong.
Listen, I can mute you. Okay.
Can we just say like a big go Phillies at least? Because like they got to come back on the Astros. Like, come on, Phils.
Yeah, I feel that, bro. Shout out to Adam Volpe. He's probably watching. I know Neil's in here. Those are some Philly fans right there. Let's go, guys. Get your team back up. Let's go. Come on. Let's see it happen.
It's been a good
Astros
run. Can't end this way. Can't end this way.
No doubt. Thank you, Rebels, for being here. We love and appreciate you all. Again, we just want to say that, you know, we're here every week on Fridays. If you want to come chat, you want to come hang out, whatever the case. And ultimately, if you want to check out www.thesalesrebellion.com, which you can see right down here, learn about our one-on-one programs, the things that we do as a rebellion, please feel free.
We got the squadron Tuesday, couple spots left. Maybe Dale will open up another one if we have so many people clamoring for it. But yeah, we'd love to see you in there. We talk about things like this, not necessarily on the coaching calls, but everybody's always open to bring these things to us and have this conversation, you know, outside of it, you know, and whatnot. We just want to encourage. We want to serve. That's our heart.
No doubt. Rebels, thanks for being here. Enjoy the words of a fellow rebel, enjoying some rebellious success. himself.
I've been trying out all of your techniques, so they've been doing very, very well. Like, I'm really impressed, Dale. I don't know if that's a good thing for you to hear, but like, it's been very, very successful in a very short amount of time. These are like sometimes leads that are horrible. I told you this already, but like I told one of my other BDRs, I was like, yeah, this is the line I'm going to use. And they're like, you're crazy. Like, this is never going to work. And like, I haven't heard anybody say no to me this past week.